Dark Souls, a game series so special that it has a whole subgenre named after it. I recently started playing Peak Souls 3, and while I was playing it, I, for some reason, decided to make my own Dark Souls-like boss fight. There would be epic attacks, unique strategies. You could fight in so many different ways. It was going to be perfect. But then I got bored after 2 weeks, and now I have this. Yeah, I don't think I'm getting a job at From Software anytime soon. But it's still a fun game, and I think it's interesting enough to make a video about. Or rather, I didn't want to waste the month I spent working on it without even making the video. This is how it all happened. After pondering for some time, I got the idea of a duel in an ancient arena between two knights that both had the same abilities. The enemy knight would analyze how you move and evolve during the battle, which means you would need to change your playstyle while you're fighting. For that, I wanted a bunch of attacks that all countered each other and had unique interactions. Now that you've heard my original idea, you may have noticed that it sounds slightly different from what you're seeing. And yeah, it does. That's because I realized I don't want to spend more than a month on this. So I tweaked out the design, and now the enemy has a bunch of unique moves, and you can only do basic stuff. That's mostly because you would be way too overpowered if you could use the same attacks as the enemy because... Wait, get a little closer so he can't hear you. He's kinda stupid. If this disappointed you, don't worry. I added the most important part of a Souls game, feet. But I'll explain all that when I get to it. Let's rewind to the beginning. I started by making the arena for the fight. This is the only part of the game development that actually turned out the way I wanted. It's a simple Roman-type arena with 4 pillars on the sides. I tried to add some textures to the blocks, but it didn't look good, so I removed it. I once again stole the shaders from my other games, and now it looks like this. The next thing I needed was a knight, so I did my best to make something resembling a knight using this reference. And it turned out, let's just say he's got a face only a mother could love. I gave him a sword and some budget animations, and now we have our character. I know it doesn't look like much, but it surprised me that it didn't look terrible and actually looked like a real walking animation. I wasn't this excited since I discovered the shoe store in GTA when I was 10. The camera for the player is similar to Dark Souls, but the rotation on the Y-axis is locked, so it's always at this angle. I decided to add everything movement related first, so I added a jump, crouch, and dodge roll animations. Except it's not really a dodge roll, it's more of a dodge front flip, but my knight is just that cool. Anyways, now it was time to add some attacks, so I made a slash attack that does high stamina and low health damage, and a stab attack that does the opposite. Both of those attacks have matching parry animations. As I was testing this, I realized that walking while crouching looks kinda off, so I of course did nothing to change it since it was extremely funny. Now we need an enemy to test the attacks on. Now hear me out. The enemy looks the same as you. This definitely has a lore reason, and isn't just because I was too lazy to make another knight. To make the sword swings do something, I added an animation for getting hit. I think this looks like a fairly realistic reaction to getting slashed with a sword, right? I gave our brave volunteer a sword and made him swing it every few seconds, and guess what? It didn't work, and I spent way too much time trying to make the collisions work, but I finally fixed it, and now it works perfectly. Now that that worked, I got to work on my other attacks. A jump attack, mana slash, sword throw, mana infuse, and healing. The jump attack is you flying into the air, charging up and getting launched towards the enemy. It does high damage, but it also takes a lot of stamina. The mana slash is, just as the name suggests, a slash of mana. It does mid damage, but it leaves you vulnerable for some time after using it. Now take a guess at what the sword throw is. If you said throwing your sword, you're wrong. It spawns 2 giant pictures of feet on the wall. I'm joking, the feet pics are always on the wall, but yeah, the attack is throwing your sword. It travels relatively fast towards wherever the player is looking at. Once it hits something, it's going to return. If the sword misses the target the first time, it can still hit the second time while it's coming back. Mana Infuse is the knight playing an animation of his left hand touching the sword and getting double damage on his next attack. And finally, the healing is you stabbing your sword into the ground and healing until you let go of the button. It takes a lot of stamina, and you can't move while doing it. Unfortunately, I had to remove everything except healing, because all of these would just obliterate the enemy. This goofball had absolutely no chance against any of these. I gave all of these attacks to the enemy to make the fight more fair, except for the jump attack. I tried again and again, but I just couldn't get the enemy to use it right, so I had to make the difficult decision of removing it. Deleting the jump attack was truly a nation-level tragedy. Anyways, after giving him the attacks, the enemy was starting to look like an actual threat. But here's the thing, he's not very smart. Once you figure out his attack pattern, you can just kinda do this. And there's nothing he can do about it. After that, the game needed some UI to show the death and victory screens, as well as health and stamina stats. Since I was originally going to use a mana system, I also added a bar for that. I don't know about you, but I think this looks pretty Dark Soulsy. Somewhere around this point, I decided to make the characters smaller, because they looked a little too big for the arena. Now it was starting to look like an actual game. Definitely not a good game, but at least it was playable. Since I didn't want to just drop the player in the fight immediately after opening the game, I made a menu screen that has two options. You can start the game or change your sensitivity. Below that is a list with all the controls. If you start the game and start having a claustrophobic attack, I have bad news for you, since the only way to leave the fight is closing the game, since I didn't feel like adding in game settings. I'm sure you're wondering how you're going to return to the menu when you lose or win the fight. And that's a great question. The last part was getting sound effects to make this already realistic experience even more realistic. I found the sounds online, and after slight tweaks, they're now in the game. The last part was getting the background music. I tried to make my own song using beatbox, and let's just say it didn't turn out the way I wanted. Since I wanted something that wasn't complete garbage, I used Beethoven's Overture to Egmont, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Why did I choose Beethoven's song? Obviously it's because Dark Souls is set in the Middle Ages, which was a long time ago, and Beethoven is also old and he lived a long time ago, so, you can see the connection, right? And yeah, that's the game. Here's how it all looks together. As I previously said, it's not a good game. It's an absolute masterpiece. Miyazaki, please hire me. Anyways, thanks for watching. You can play the game for free from the link in the description. And, yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.